good evening. Or, under the seasonal circumstances, should I say, come in and know me better, man. Yes, it is Christmas time again, the one time of the year when people around the world entreat good favours from jovial, overweight, bearded men with an infectious laugh. Who's been naughty? But here at What Now, it is our very first AuthorTube Christmas. And while we've been while I have been massively enjoying watching the Christmassy tags that people have been doing, for me to mark the occasion of the season and AuthorTube's involvement in it for me, I have been looking towards the past, nostalgic creature that I am, strictly speaking my own local history. About 4.5 miles from where I'm sat right now, in that direction, not that you have a reference for it, and about 150 years ago, Charles Dickens himself used to go to the St. George's Hall on Lime Street and give live readings, indeed live performances of A Christmas Carol, in order to raise money for various charities and those who do good around the countries back in those days of old Victoria. And so I thought, in that vein, in the honour of Mr. Dickens and Christmas stories, and ghost stories in particular, I would tell you a story. I would read to you. And you are welcome to switch off now if you like. I've already got the view. Those of you who watch regularly are, well, not only very kind, but also stark raving bloody mad, but will also be aware that I am writing a novel which is a complete reworking of Christmas traditions and the mythologies and the folklore that go into the winter festivals. This one right here. Actually, it's due a substantial rewrite, but this is the one I have at the moment. You see, I firmly believe that the child version of us still lives inside us somewhere in here or in here. And for me, things like Christmas bring the little bastard out in force, scratching his way to the surface as he is wont to do. And I think writers in particular suffer from this kind of inner infant, this wide-eyed wonder, and I think the writer or the filmmaker or whatever else who loses that image, that idea, is doomed to banality. So all of my writing has been geared towards the notion that our childhood dreams, our childish view of the world, never actually goes away. It just grows up with us and incorporates more adult things. Now, I was always a very ghoulish and macabre child, and I grew into a very ghoulish and macabre man. I like being frightened. I like the creepy. I like the worrying. I like the uncanny, as Freud would have it. And as I grew up and I read more about mythology and specifically of my own country and those immediately around it, and folklore and good old-fashioned fairy tales that's all blood and oak trees, and you know, it's all a metaphor for something else altogether. While I never lost my love of Christmas, it just grew up to incorporate all these things, and it occurred to me, and I wonder if it ever occurred to you, that Christmas Eve is just as haunted and just as creepy as Halloween. Think about it. My whole aesthetic here would be so much better if it wasn't for the f***ing traffic. I've played to some tough rooms in my life, but that road out there is the worst heckler I have ever had. But no, really, think about it. Christmas, as we call it now, the Midwinter Festival, is a meeting point of many, many different civilizations. There's Roman influence in there, there's Norse paganism in there, there's Celtic paganism in there, There's Christianity in there, rather neatly coming from south, north, west and east, which is relative to the camera. So it's this meeting point of different ideas all mixed together, but the central one is that in the winter, the world is dead. And it's trying to kill you as well. So what do? We make it light. We make it warm. We feed the hungry. We gather together. We become the most human we are. And in so doing, we give life back to the world. I'm going somewhere with this. Incidentally, I'm not trying to convert anyone. I'm trying to pitch me book. But this is an idea that touches me very deeply. Because the interesting thing, I mean, no one can deny that we live in very dark times. The interesting thing that you'll notice is that if you are in a dark place and you spark a light, it makes the dark darker. It's almost as if the black and white thing was intentional all along, wasn't it? It wasn't. In my teens, it always bothered when I started to think in this direction. It always bothered me that I've never seen a version of A Christmas Carol filmed that did it as a ghost story. I think the George C. Scott one comes pretty close. It comes reasonably close in that arena. But I mean, the subtitle is A Ghost Story of Christmas. This is scary. You need to have the scary so you can have the right. Scrooge needs to be a bad man. Well, he's not really a bad man, but I don't have time for literary criticism in this video. In order to become a good one, you need to have the winter so you can have the spring. You need to have the cold so you can have the warm. You need to come through that. And I always wanted there to be a huge story in which these old ideas and their new formations clashed and fought out, and the dream world, the dreamscape that all humans live in at the same time was... And then I remembered, oh hell, I want to be a writer. And I think I'm on firm ground here, that with an awful lot of AuthorTube people, there's a fair spread of genre fiction writers and speculative fiction writers, fantasy, sci-fi, all the derivatives. I think I'm fair in saying that there is always a moment where the mad scientist comes out. And you realise, oh no, wait, I can do this myself. And I realised that I had complete license to add something to the canon of Christmas stories that no one had done. They'd gone some way towards, but hadn't pushed it all the way to play with all the elements at once. And I thought, now I can do it. And you can probably tell that it's joyful. It feels so good. And I think when you feel joy in your writing, it gets an awful lot easier. It doesn't actually get easier, it's actually a pain in the ass. But you smile through it and you get giddy, and you sit in front of a camera and you get giddy and show that giddiness to complete strangers. But it's Christmas, so who gives a shit? Not me, not you. Maybe one person will dislike it. Who cares? It's Christmas. So here's what I've done, or what I'm in the process of doing, and I will probably... My intention is, when I come back to make a follow-up video to this next year, I will have a full working draft of it, is to take all of these elements and pit them against each other in one urban fantasy horror comic novel. It's huge, I love it so much. Or, to put it another way, all together, that and this, with all our tricks, we're making Christmas time. So, any of you who are still watching, any of you who have stayed through the inane chatter, the jovial tangents, and the traffic noise from outside, I'm guessing that you probably share a little of the mindset I have. In particular, the idea that the child version of you is still in there and that your childish view of the world has just grown up with you. So, what I want you to imagine, still pitching my book here, is that the world of dreams and nightmares that you thought existed when you were little does actually exist. Just out the corner of your eye, or in very special places where the gap is narrowest. It's a world that has a symbiotic relationship with ours. We shape it, and it shapes us. And now imagine that the winter that was bitter and crushing and cruel and deadly and actively out to kill the human species. Imagine that human dreams had manufactured a figure to guard the midwinter against the things that live there. And they had forgotten that that's what it was. And then, one Christmas Eve, on a night when the gap between those two worlds is narrowest, that thing isn't there, but other things are. And they're tired of being dreams. They want the real world, and they're coming after us. And suddenly all those childhood nightmares are real. And it's a Christmas Eve to remember. This is roughly what I'm going to read now. I'm going to read the first page of my novel. Well, it's 400 and something words. I'm going to read it off the sheet because, unlike Mr. Dickens, my memory is not what it used to be. But doing things like this and giving a slightly dramatic reading keeps my dead dreams of being an actor alive, so I hope you'll bear with a poor bearded fool. I like preambles. Not all the time, but I think some stories do warrant them. Different from a prologue, mind you. And particularly because I am trying to bring that spark of childishness, wonder and horror back into my readers. There's something about a preamble that is suggestive of the bedtime routine when your parent or guardian would settle you down and make you comfortable and get you into the right, almost meditative mind state for the story. There's something about the way a preamble talks in a fantasy book that says, "Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin." There's something in the way the trees move, especially when there's no wind. Something in the way streetlights catch branches and road signs and railings, when the lights go out and the shadows take on deranged lives of their own, when the wind finds a voice and the earth twists away from the life-giving sun. There's something in the way the trees move, watching, whispering straight into your head, "Run. Run so you can be chased. Run so you can be caught." There's something in that shadowed hush, graceful, vicious, and altogether wrong. Sometimes there is the unfathomable sensation that something is watching you in the dark, that there are faces in the flames or sleigh bells in the snow. And then you feel it. For just a brilliant, burning moment, you feel the great starless night and the roadless wild, the blood and the wind, the forests and the plains on the curve of antique imagination, and the sudden, clinging horror to know beyond all doubt we are not alone in this world or this room. But it's just a moment, melting away and soon forgotten. It's not as if anything was chasing you, coming to take you away. and you forget that you ever thought or even wondered. So, of course, you never actually did. Never actually wondered who was looking out at the flames at you. Never wondered who was driving the sleigh in the snow, or where they were going, or why. This is a true story about the nightmares and the dream war, about the coming of the withered king and his army of terrors, and the collapse of the walls between the worlds and the humans who saw too late just what was going on. None of it actually happened, mind you, but that doesn't mean it isn't true. Unless you're in a courtroom or a laboratory, true and real don't have to mean the same thing. There's a first time for everything, you see, though it's never been as simple as that. Everything breaks apart into its own little pieces sooner or later. Genes, thoughts, molecules and dreams, until time and tide wash them together again, looking fresh and new. But nothing ever changes. We tell the same stories and we live the same lives, telling after telling and age after age, until, like a face in the crowd, there's something dreadfully familiar. You've been here before. Many, many times. You never left, in fact, because it never ended. But there's a first time for everything. Everything is a first time. First times are everything. There is a first time for first times. This is one of them, and it starts like this. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and there was something in the trees. Good evening.
Hark how the bells, sweet silver bells, all seem to say, throw cares away.